Good morning or good afternoon to everybody, depending on where you are in our country. We're very, very excited that you're able to join us today for this launch of a new stream on Interweave. For those who know the Interweave program, we're part of the McConnell Foundation, and our objective is to be able to provide supports and services and different sources of information and ideas to organizations in the community sector in Canada. And of course, as a result of the extraordinary crisis that we're going through right now, we're very, very pleased to be able to be working with Kimberly Namrava to launch a new stream that's going to focus specifically on how we as organizations in the charity and nonprofit sector can actually be leading through crisis. And we're incredibly grateful that she's able to join us today, and that so many of you have been able to join us as well. I'm going to take us through a couple of pieces just on the Zoom platform, for those who aren't familiar with it, although I think we're probably all getting increasingly familiar with Zoom over the last few days. As you're coming in, please make sure that your audio is properly connected. Make sure that you're following the instructions to connect either by phone or by your computer line. We've programmed the system so that everybody is on mute by default as they're coming in. Given the size of the group, we're probably going to need to keep people on mute today, but we will be using the chat functions so we can ask questions and collect information. So if you're seeing a line through your little microphone and a line through your little camera on your name next to the participant pane, then that's how you know that your video is off and your microphone is off. The other main feature that we are going to be using today is the chat box. The chat box is where we'd like to be collecting questions during today's webinar. My colleague Jacob Dicker is online, and he's listed as Interweave admin. He's the host. And if you direct questions to Interweave admin, or if you direct your questions to everybody, Jake's going to be able to keep a running list of our questions there and ensure that everybody's questions get answered. We're going to move fairly quickly through Kimberly's presentation, so we'd ask that if you do put in a question, can you please put in the name or a reference to which slide that question is about. And as we open it up for Kimberly to be responding to some of these questions at the end of her presentation, we'll have a better reference and she'll be able to go back and forth then. We are also recording today's session, and we are of course going to make the slides available to everybody at the end of the conversation. Another reference piece for those who've been seeing this in the news over the last week or so, there have been incidents where people have been coming into Zoom presentations and taking them over and showing some very, very unpleasant content and essentially ruining the presentation. We're hoping, of course, that does not take place during this presentation. We've password protected the session today to ensure that doesn't happen. But if it does, then please be advised that we are going to shut down the presentation. Of course, we'll be emailing everybody the information and follow-up items after the call anyway. But if that unfortunate event were to occur, we would just have to shut down. Our Twitter handle is @Interweave. We really encourage you to engage with us on that platform after today's webinar if that's to your liking. And of course, please feel free to put those questions into the chat box for my colleague Jake to be able to take a look at them as we're going through. On that note, I'm very, very happy to be able to actually take us into today's webinar content. And to begin that, as we begin all formal McConnell webinars, which is the acknowledgement of traditional territory. Even though we're all working remotely and no longer sort of based at where our offices may be, we do feel that it's very important to acknowledge that the McConnell Foundation head offices are located on traditional territory of the Mohawk people in Montreal. And it's of the highest importance to McConnell to both acknowledge this and to understand that reconciliation and the creation and support of a reconciliation economy is core to all the work that we do as a foundation, and to understand that it's not simply about acknowledgement of the territory, but understanding how that fits into all the work that we do. And even today, as we're talking about crisis response, we want to be keeping in mind that we're talking about crisis response for the entirety of our country. And that, of course, includes the many longstanding Indigenous nations that to whom this territory is belonging. Our presentation today is going to be ably led by Kimberly Namrava. I have to say this is the quickest we've ever put together an Inuweave stream, and we're only able to do that because we're working with the best. And thankfully we were able to get her on short notice. So Kimberly Namrava is an emergency response expert and leader in the field in Canada. Began her career as a first aider, a lifeguard, and in marine search and rescue. And she worked with the Canadian Red Cross for more than 3 decades, recently retiring as the Vice President responsible for British Columbia and Yukon. And she's supported communities through large-scale emergencies like the Asian tsunami and forest fires in British Columbia and Alberta. She's going to be leading our webinar today. She's also going to be helping us generate all the wonderful content and connections and mentorship opportunities that are going to be coming from this new stream on Inuweave. We're incredibly excited to have her with us and to turn the presentation over to you now, Kimberly.
Thanks very much, Ryan. Next. So I'm going to leap right in. And as we all face the biggest challenge of our time, I want to share with you some information and tools to frame, lead, and communicate. This is part, as Ryan said, of the new stream being launched by Inuweave that will include support of a mentorship program, resources, and wayfinding tools. I'll be giving you some more details on those later in the presentation. And as Ryan said, these slides will be available to you after the webinar.
I should, sorry, Kimberly, to interject. I should also make aware that we are also going to share the recording. That'll be posted on the Inuweave site.
Excellent. Next. If you've not seen the Twitter message from General Romeo Delair to frontline workers, it's worth tracking down. As a general, we all know from the Rwandan genocide, he has experience with overwhelming situations. Acknowledging the unprecedented scope and scale of the situation, he framed it as something they've been preparing for. He went on to warn workers, you may not have all the resources you need to achieve the ultimate mission of saving everyone. And this will create ethical and moral dilemmas that you will face, and you will have to count on your experience, your knowledge, and your skills to pull you through these demanding, gut-wrenching decisions. My heart and admiration goes out to all the people on the front line and to all of you who are stepping up to serve. What I noted in his address was his assertion that the workers had been preparing for this demanding task. At first, I dismissed it as not applying to me, but then decided to make it apply. Even though none of us asked for this, the work each of us has done can help. We can accept the situation, next slide, and choose to frame it as our leadership challenge. Framing a major response, a major disaster as a leadership challenge can give us a little bit of distance. It does not make it any easier, but it gives us space to commit to applying our and our organization's best skills. Because of this, disasters are not only a period of great challenge, but also of great opportunity. Next. Oh, I think you, thank you. Kurt Lewin developed this model of organizational change, and nowhere is it more obvious than during an emergency. When all the norms unfreeze, there's an opportunity for creative thinking and collaborative action. In describing the medical operations in New York, the New Yorker magazine said, there is a complete subjugation of ego. Senior physicians are performing tasks that they haven't done since medical school. Medicine, normally governed by rigid hierarchies and siloed fiefdoms, is free. During a disaster, innovative ideas can be developed and implemented in record time. This may be the time to strike up that hereto unimagined collaboration, to pivot to areas that need support, and to break down barriers to action. From my experience, there's something to know about this change opportunity state. it is much shorter than one would think or hope. I personally think this is because during a major disruption, people are open to try anything that will work. But it's an exhausting time for everybody, and the desire for stability is exceedingly strong. If the new way of working is not normalized quickly, people will revert to old habits. So innovative ideas do need to move fast. Next slide. Next slide. Every disaster is different, but they all follow this general pattern of an initial level of preparedness where the blue line meets the y-axis, the fast response phase when the disaster hits, a slower rising but extremely important recovery phase, and mitigation and prevention measures throughout. Done well, the level of preparation for the next disaster increases. Response is a time to mobilize your get her done people, moving quickly to do things like flatten the curve of infections and protect people and the economy. A key point in this model is that recovery needs to start sooner rather than later, even if only at a small scale. Here you'll need your strategic thinkers who can consider future consequences. This may mean partnering with another organization or setting up a small team, or in smaller organizations, a person to start looking at those needs. We are all in early response, but being aware of these 4 phases helps us pace and prepare. Next slide. So where are you in your early response phase? In some areas, you may be pivoting. Others may be planned out. Regardless of where you are, do take a moment to ensure that you're clear on your goals, principles, and priorities. Next slide. Believe it or not, even organizations like Red Cross that respond to disasters every day will take the time to enunciate its goals and priorities for major responses. They will look very different depending on your sector, whether you're operating a daycare, supporting people on the street, coordinating cultural events, or an organization that does research and advocacy. This should not take much time, but will help ensure that you, as a leader, are not making assumptions about where your organization is going. Clearly outlined and communicated, they're extremely useful for your personnel in helping manage the infinite number of what-ifs that can cause paralysis in people's work at this time. Next slide. When we scale up to respond to disasters, there are the predictable needs. Those are regular and recurrent regardless of the emergency, like food, clothing, shelter, physical and mental health, schooling, and childcare. Then there are the emergent needs that are distinctive to each response. Examples of these from forest fires included the need to rapidly rebuild fences for cattle ranchers because they could collect their cattle again after the fire, but their fences had burned down. Or supporting extermination costs for families that had been evacuated from rural areas because of an extreme influx of rat infestations into their homes. You have to, of course, pay attention to the regular and recurrent needs, but also keep an eye for the emergent ones. This is where quick action can really help people. InnoWeave will soon send you a link to another webinar that considers the stages of scale up, scale down, hibernate or close more fully, and also provides some excellent financial predicting and management tools that have been developed by Scale Collaborative. Next slide. At every disaster debrief I have ever attended, communication was a priority issue. In times of emergency, focusing on the credible, verifiable, and reliable sources of information can help people filter what to share and what to let go. Do remember that the goal of media is still to get the highest number of readers. While many sources are being extremely responsible, there are still many others that are spreading misinformation. This credible, verifiable, and reliable lens is really useful in responding to the many "I heard" statements and conversations. People often share bad news, particularly in an emergency, as a way of getting support from others for their fears. And we don't want to shut down that entirely, but we can redirect the conversation into a supportive discussion that acknowledges the concerns and emphasizes what we know now to move forward. It helps people differentiate speculation from reality. These are some, next slide. These are some of my favorite go-to sites for information, and further on in the slide deck that you can receive, it has the links. Next slide. It is vital to communicate frequently to your stakeholders, even to give a small update, thank people, and affirm that you're continuing along your present course. I hear many people say, "I can't believe that was just 2 weeks ago." This is absolutely typical of the intensity that happens during an emergency. So for your stakeholders, it may feel like much longer since your last communication. Next slide. If you have a culture of open information sharing in your organization, this is a time to manage it centrally. You may be considering strategies you've never dreamed of before. So it's very important to be very clear and disciplined on what personnel can share with each other. People are both overwhelmed and hungry for news. And once a rumor gets out, it takes a lot of work to correct it. A friend of mine is a high school principal. She told me this week that the hardest aspect of this situation for her is not knowing the answer, because in her school, she usually does. You can help people get used to that shift by equipping them with information on where to refer questions or holding messages for situations that are still developing. As leaders, if you're not sick of saying your key messages, you're probably not saying them enough. People need to hear things 4 times before it's digested, and that's outside of a pandemic situation. Next slide. This is a little checklist that you can use to review your communication before it goes out. Keep in mind that different audiences, frontline personnel, clients, managers, donors, and funders will need different information. Parse those out, but be careful not to make so many groups that your communication workload becomes unmanageable. Next slide. Like so many situations in leadership, managing the pandemic will require that you address paradoxical need. On those areas that you need to scale up, it will be going big fast. But this emergency is slow moving and long term. We need to pace ourselves like the marathon. And we'll often hit periods of hurry up and wait, where you're asking yourself or your people to move very quickly and then stopping because they need to wait for another part of the system to catch up. Being able to name these realities of disasters as normal can help you and your team manage them. Next slide. As managers, you may have been through a number of type indicator tools over your career. While it's most common for a stressful situation to increase the intensity of people's natural styles, there are a few people who will completely abandon their norms and use another style. During an emergency like this, styles that need to have all the answers before they proceed may find it particularly difficult. The learning that I've had here is that it's normal for people's natural styles to become more pronounced, while some may shift. And knowing this, you can be ready to support these shifts, redirect, or adapt with that person. Next slide. When we managed disasters at Red Cross, we automatically fell into a mode of cutting people some slack. This didn't mean a reduction of standards or quality, but a recognition that when people get tired, there will be more errors, so we need to support each other. For example, if your organization doesn't do this already, increase that openness to checking each other's work, or putting an email on top of a coworker's pile of emails by resending it so they can access it easy for a meeting that they're attending. And while it may be patently clear to you as a leader what has been put on hold, you may be surprised at how many people may not have that same understanding. Clearly identifying the various projects that will be put on hold will help relieve people's stress. Next slide. One thing to remember is not to underestimate how closely your personnel, family, and friends will be watching you as a leader or manager during this time. There is a perception and expectation that you have power and even control over situations. A colleague of mine told me that she remembered in one of her first disasters, me saying to her, "Don't run. Unless it's a fire, don't run." You can provide huge support to your people by managing your own level of intensity. They will watch how you care for others and how you care for yourself. Next slide. Caring for yourself will be one of the hardest things to remember to do. And it's so important that you do practice self-care so that you can continue to help others. The McConnell Foundation, through InnoWeave, is stepping up to provide you with support and resources. The first of these streams is online mentors. These are confidential, experienced leaders who have faced disaster and emergency situations before. Perhaps you want to discuss how to reframe the emergency situation for your organization because you feel that some of your personnel have gone into paralysis. Or maybe you have a crazy idea that you think could make a difference and want a sounding board to help refine it before sharing it more widely. Or you want to talk about changes in management style during the response and how to address it. These mentors will be available to you online to support and discuss things like this and other topics as we go through this time. Many of you may be used to managing on your own. Remember, you are not alone out there. Everyone wants to help. The first group of mentors will come online soon. In a situation like this, an experienced person can be of great help, so I encourage you to reach out. There's no charge to you for this support, and it is confidential. We will also be developing webinars, panel discussions, and other resources to help you in your organizations. We need your help by outlining topics and areas of interest that are relevant and interesting to you. And Ryan will be following up with you on that as we go along. Next slide. Finally, I know we will get through this together. Did you ever wonder how those teams who rescued the men caught in the mine in Chile, or the team that came together to support and rescue the Philippine soccer team who were trapped in the cave, did it? It's called teaming. They left their egos at the door and focused on the mission. During my time with Red Cross, a lot of people would say to me, like, why do you like working in disasters? But what you see happening in disasters is you see everyone turning their skills and dedication to addressing a common issue and a common threat. This is how I am so confident that we will get through this. It is our opportunity in this sector, and indeed our responsibility, to ensure that we're working together to make sure that the different world that we will be building is a really good one. Thank you so much. Onward.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, for taking us through that content built on not only your expertise but your experience. And it's from Kimberly's extensive experience that we've crafted this support that is available of the mentorship piece that's going to be going along with the dedicated resources and other pieces that are going to be coming available through Interweave. You as the participants in this webinar today are going to be our soft launch of that mentoring support. So in follow-up to this conversation, Interweave will be sending you a note, which will include guidance on how you as leaders in your organizations may be able to connect with us and access that mentoring, as well as Kimberly mentioned, some short survey instruments just to let us know what are the top of mind issues for you right now and where would you like additional support, so that we can continue to build things out on the Interweave platform over the coming days and weeks. That's most responsive to your needs. And is able to provide the most relevant support during this difficult time. This will be useful when we send the slide deck out to everybody following the session. But great sources of information that Kimberly had mentioned during her presentation that provide not only guidance but also sort of aggregation of information, so you don't have to go to too many places. And with that, we're concluded in our content. We don't want to take too much time from you today, so we will say thank you to everybody for joining. If you have to go, we understand, but we're here for the remainder of the hour, and happy to be fielding any questions that come into that chat box. Again, just write them to Interweave admin, that's my colleague Jake, or put them up for everybody to see, and we'll endeavor to get through as many of those as we can before the hour is out. Just a reminder again to please note if you're referencing a specific slide to let us know which one it is so we can navigate back to that for its discussion. Any final closeout points, Kimberly? Or
no, nothing in particular. No, other than to say I wish everyone the best, and we'll look forward to working and supporting you.
Absolutely. We'll echo that message, and very excited, as Kimberly mentioned, to get some mentorship resources online and in your hands as soon as we can. So Jake, you're going to be running the chat box if anything comes in. We have one question that has come into the chat box directly to me. The question is, are we going to be recruiting mentors to work with people? Yes, the mentors stream on this. We've been recruiting so far, and we will be continuing to recruit. That's going to be done and led directly by Kimberly. It's not open registration for mentorship at this time because, of course, we're looking for a very specific type of expertise. But if you do have skills in this area or people who you think would like to be connected, please do connect them to Interweave or directly to Kimberly's email as she included there. I have one comment on how we're going to be able to access the mentorship. So it's going to be a little bit different from normal Interweave. On Interweave, you normally sort of apply, you put in an application, and we match you with a coach, or you find a coach for yourself, and then there's a process of applying for a grant. We're going to really take that down to just the bare minimum on this stream, so that basically you'll put in a request to Interweave, and we'll do our best to match you with a mentor who's urgently available, and we'll make the connections from there. So it's not going to be a heavy application process by any extent, and as Kimberly mentioned, there'll be no cost for going through this. I see a question: are we going to get the actual recording? Yes, the recording for this, we'll edit it a little bit, make it a little bit more easy to consume. Will be posted on the Interweave website for this stream, which should go live tomorrow. If somebody does have a personal interest in serving as a mentor, I'm seeing that question come in. Who should they reach out to? You're free to reach out to Kimberly at this address, or you can come through the main Interweave address, info@interweave.ca. We have the question of when the content is going to be available in French. This presentation is going to be translated. We hope to have the slide material available in French in a couple days. It's worth noting that the mentor pool is bilingual. And if you speak English or French, you'll be able to access mentorship in both of those languages. We have questions. Will the links to content be emailed to participants? Yes, yes. The links will be emailed to participants. All right. We have a question. Can existing Interweave coaches get mentoring as well to support their provision of support to other organizations that are going through it? I'd say we're open to that. Interweave coaches are themselves leaders in the community nonprofit sector, so we are happy to be providing that support if that's something Interweave coaches feel they would like to ask. I have one question that's coming in around how we're going to ensure ethics and the monitoring of ethics during this process. I would like to underscore there that has been accounted for in our mentorship guidelines. Kimberly, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more to that, but that is, there's a rigorous ethics and obligations element to being a mentor here.
Yes, I think, it's a really important question. The mentors are very clear that of the role that they play as a sounding board, as focusing on their shared experience rather than just giving advice. It's not dissimilar to coaching, but it's not quite the same thing. They have all signed agreements that uphold the highest standards of inclusion and confidentiality and neutrality. The only exception to confidentiality would be situations that the mentors have a duty to report under legislation, which of course is should the conversation move to a situation of child or elder abuse or something like that. So that would, and of course both the mentor and mentee would be familiar with or should be familiar with those legislated requirements. So it's very important. It's very important that this is confidential for people, and that they can share some ideas and concerns that they're grappling with.
All right, thank you. We have a couple questions coming in from some active Interweave coaches, just wanting to distinguish the mentoring that's going to be offered on this stream versus coaching that's available on other Interweave streams. And that's a good thing just to distinguish here. This stream here, Leading Through Crisis, is new. It's going to have a new dedicated set of mentors, and they're going to offer those relationships in sort of this this one-on-one mentorship format with leaders in the sector, as Kimberly has been describing. The Interweave platform itself is going to also open up our coaching streams on all other streams to types of micro coaching, where we allow existing Interweave coaches to be offering smaller engagements at a lower barrier in terms of application and things like that. These are different, so we're not asking every existing Interweave coach to be a mentor on this stream, and we're not asking the mentors on this stream to do micro coaching on other Interweave streams. They're distinct, and we'll be rolling out the other pieces on other elements of the Interweave platform probably later this week. But this new stream is launching now. There's also a question about how people will be matched with mentors and organizations. So that'll be one of two ways. Either you'll come in through Interweave and we'll have an opportunity to find a mentor who's available and best fit to your circumstance and your sector. Or we're also going to have the list of mentors be publicly available. People will be able to search it and reach out directly to a mentor who they feel is best fit to their situation. Kimberly, we've got a question here that maybe you're best placed to answer. What's your advice for us as leaders to support our staff and to remind our supporters of the importance of longer-term work that isn't frontline, especially for those of us who are doing work in advocacy and policy change? How do we keep our staff and supporters feeling fired up about our mission and our work?
It's a really good question, and I think that there is no doubt, if we go back to that slide 12 that had the 4 phases of disaster, what happens, Perfect. Thanks, Brian. When we look at this slide of the 4 phases of disaster, there's no doubt that when you look at the resources during the response phase, that the entire area affected, in this case, the world, is focused on response. But I think one of the things that you're already seeing is you're seeing that at a certain point, people will get not only a fatigue for that, but they'll also start to think about, okay, what's coming next? How do we move out of this emergency? What's the future going to look like, and how can I be prepared for that? And so there's a couple of things. One is that when we work with our staff who have sort of been, because at Red Cross we ran a lot of other programs other than disasters, and would remind them that it's normal during a response phase that everyone's focused on that particular disaster. Their work is no less important. And that was a message that we gave a lot of time, is that, you know, the work that people continue to do in so many areas is vital, and even more important as we move into the recovery phase. So it's it may be a little bit of hibernation, and certainly understanding that that some programs would be ramped down until we were able to ramp them up again. But also, these are some of the people that you can start thinking about how the new world will look like in terms of the support and advocacy work that they're doing. Because one of the things we also notice a lot in response is the people that are highly involved in the response phase are extremely exhausted. And so they need that support from others who may not have been as busy during response as they go into the recovery phase.
All right, thank you, Kimberly. We have another question here for you. The question says, this will be a protracted crisis with residual long-lasting challenges. What's some advice on leadership managing over the long term?
My biggest thing is take care of yourself and your team. Take care. I can't repeat this enough. It's the hardest. It's so hard to do, because when people move into leadership and management roles, it's because they have a passion and drive for the work that they're doing. You're absolutely right. This is going to be such a marathon, and that self-care of people, the self-care and care of your people is absolutely vital. I remember probably I had more staff crying in my office when I pulled them off of a disaster response than any other single situation, because they were so passionate about the work they were doing, but that we could see that they were no longer functioning at a level that was healthy for them or for others. And it was only until they had a break that they realized how overexhausted they were. And so it really is that self-care and care for others that will make the big difference. The other thing too is, if you can, for groups that are not involved in the front line and some of their programs are scaling down right now, this is a great time to invest in training, because so many training programs are being offered either at a reduced or no charge. So it's also a time to invest in those other teams.
All right, thank you, Kimberly. I would echo that. I think not only is this disaster that we're responding to, but to a certain extent, everybody's experiencing part of it with the isolation factors coming in. So taking care of yourself is it's got to be top of our list. Still taking questions in the chat if anybody has questions. Would just also like to remind people that innoweave.ca is going to be hosting all of the resources that we're curating on this topic. So that's all of the fantastic resources that Kimberly is producing. And as she mentioned, we'll be bringing new ones online every couple of days over the next few weeks. But we're also curating a larger list of resources just on the topics of how the nonprofit and charitable sector is responding to this crisis. That's also on innoweave.ca and available for people to take a look at, as well as to send any suggestions or questions that they'd like to see answered in that list. So, so please feel free to visit and check that out. And we'll hope to keep that as up to date as we can with your help, letting us know where we should be focusing the curation of those resources. We have a comment here, Kimberly. Sort of two key roles come to mind to consider. The first is assignment of someone or a team to focus on worker care, and others that are assigned to recovery. Is that a structure you've seen?
Yeah, certainly worker care is a key one. And I think if you're in a leadership role, the best way to focus on worker care is to role model it. If in organizations people assign a team to worker care, but the leadership and the management doesn't role model their own worker care, it will undermine that work. So, you know, for those of you that are in a leadership position, do keep in mind just how important your modeling is. And I know it's particularly hard for you, but even sometimes if it has a perception that you're offline and you may be doing a couple of calls or something like that so that you can keep some projects going, it still gives permission to your team to do their self-care. The recovery team is one that, as I say, may start off very small, but it's starting to turn your mind to what that can look like.
Right, that's excellent advice, Kimberly. I know it's excellent advice for me. I think there's probably a couple people on the Innovative team nodding their head going, yeah, Ryan should probably be doing that. So I'll definitely take it to heart. We have a comment in that said it would be great to hear some stories of successful responses by nonprofits to the crisis. And just on that point, we were chatting in the pre-webinar with the Innovative team that we think it would be great to get some of those stories, and we're going to look at sourcing a few of those to include them as part of the resources that are shared with this stream, so that we can see how the adaptations are being made and what organizations are doing to set themselves up for the long term. All right. Well, we're still taking questions in the chat. If anybody has pieces they'd like to pop up in there. Otherwise, we're we take no offense if people are wanting to save themselves an extra 15 minutes and get on with what I'm sure is a very busy day for everybody. So. All right, so Kimberly, we have a request here. It would be great to get your thoughts on how in these times leaders balance long-term strategic initiatives and constantly evolving operational contingencies.
Yeah, it's interesting you should say that, because in some ways, having one of the things that we do, certainly have done in Red Cross, is that to manage the response phases, we actually had response coordination teams, and those ones would be certainly led by people who were very close to the highest levels with a direct line to the CEO. At the same time, we actually had separate teams that were working on recovery and other strategic initiatives. So one of the things that seems to work really well is separate the teams so that the high-level leadership or the CEO can tap into and ensure that each of those streams are running. You've got the response phase, you've got the recovery team, you've also got business continuity with all the other work that needs to continue. And that's a very important piece, is ensuring that the business continuity needs are met. In the 4 phases of disaster, there is actually another line that I didn't include on this particular slide, and that is the business continuity, which at the beginning of the response dips heavily, but again, it comes up as sort of nearly a U shape, a wide U, and it comes back to us much faster than we'd like. So that response, recovery, and business continuity streams are all really important.
And if I can just sort of tag on to that question, Kimberly, what's your advice on business continuity in this context, where organizations just across the board may be losing capacity to the disaster, to the virus? I
think part of the analysis and the tools that Scale Collaborative will be giving are some financial tools and some more organizational tools. part of the analysis is getting down to what are your essential services. And as I said, consciously removing activities or at some points it may even be hibernating or closing programs temporarily, hopefully, so that the organization, as its resources are limited during this period, can keep the business continuity streams ready, the running, the administration, the safety streams, all the key underlying ones, and then frame out those other response functions and recovery functions so that they have an opportunity to move into new strategic initiatives, but keeping the pieces going. So it's really identifying them and making sure that you got enough resources to keep those going during these very fluid times.
Absolutely. We have a question in about maybe some connection between existing Innoweave coaches on other streams and getting some community of practice work going there, so that those coaches can look at how they can be providing best support to organizations during this time. Absolutely, we do intend to be getting that off the ground. This new stream, Leading Through Crisis, is our first objective, and getting that launched today is a huge piece that we're very excited to be offering. But our next one is getting micro coaching open and available on the Mastery Innoweave platform, and definitely be looking forward to the engagement of our coaches in that. All right, we've got about another 10 or 12 minutes that we're scheduled to keep the line open. Are there any other questions or comments or topics on which people would like Kimberly to weigh in before we actually open the confidential mentoring lines in a day or two? All right, so I'm not seeing any come in, but if people are still typing, I'll sort of give a 2-minute warning here, and otherwise we'll look to conclude. All right, getting nothing but appreciation in the chat box, Kimberly. Everybody's saying thank you.
Well, thank you. I have nothing but admiration to all of you for the work that you're doing and the challenges that I can only imagine that you're facing. And so it's, I feel very privileged to be working with you.
All right. There's another question. Are there any insights about the intercultural approach to mentoring, especially when we're working with migrants and refugees?
Yeah, it's an area that, as we're launching this as a new stream, and certainly if it proves to be popular, we certainly will be looking for other mentors, and the diversity of mentors is very, very important. I also know that there's a lot of organizations that are putting together mentoring activities, and so part of our goal is to recognize that there are other programs out there that I know will be available, and linking people to those. So yes, absolutely. As we proceed and recruiting more mentors, we'll be looking for a good diversity among them.
Absolutely. Similar question around mentors who could be working with specific ethnocultural groups, like the example provided is Black communities. And absolutely. So yes, the mentorship network is going to be sort of open from the start, and as we grow based on demand, we'll look to be including mentors who can be offering those perspectives to us. right. Last call again for questions, comments, nice stories anybody heard today that they want to share. I'll use a smile. The question, is there an organization or is it Interweave that will be tracking the impact of the COVID crisis on the nonprofit sector? So Interweave is endeavoring to play not a tracking for the entire of the sector role here, but as best as we can, we'd like to use this opportunity and our micro-coaching opportunity to keep as in touch as we can with organizations in the sector to ensure that the supports that we're offering are as responsive as they need to be at this time. So we really do encourage everybody who's working with us to stay in dialogue around this is what you're needing and this is what you're seeing, so that we as a funder can shape our offerings, and we can help with the philanthropic response that will come from other funders in Canada through our relationships there. So it's not going to be a tracking function, but it's definitely, we'd like to be keeping as informed as we can there. There are other organizations, for instance, perhaps Imagine Canada or others, who are already play umbrella roles in the sector, and are already doing a fantastic job of aggregating information and resources, and maybe providing some of that.
I was actually encouraged this morning to see a news story around the impact of the crisis on the not-for-profit sector. I think in a lot of announcements, the business sector had been focused on, and certainly impact of the pandemic on employment, but it seems the profile is increasing slightly, which is good.
And we will say that through some of our relationships here in Ottawa, Interweave does know that this is a priority for Government of Canada, is understanding how this is going to be impacting the sector, and very importantly ensuring that that the supports that are being made available to private sector employees and businesses and things like that are made appropriately available in the nonprofit sector as well. The models are a little different because we don't talk as much about losing business or things like that, but we do know it's priority, so we look forward to that being something that's able to provide some assistance. All right. Jake or Anna Sophia, do we have any comments or questions? Anna Sophia sharing that Imagine Canada is releasing some great information and articles on the impact of the crisis on the charity sector specifically.
Yeah, Ryan, nothing coming into me directly. All the questions of late have gone out to everyone. So
great.